Since Friday the 13th, good morning by the way, there's been nothing but bad news. After McKechnie's strange budget, which lowered taxes but increased revenue in some magical way. What did I do yesterday? I watched the BC Lions. Disgraceful it was. Absolutely disgraceful, that foul call.
They've gone forward. This will be a good run back. Look out, he's gone. Devon Ford is going to score. What a return.
Well, you see him running. Waddell just gives him a push there around the 7-yard line. He gets his right foot down. This is the one. Doesn't look out of bounds from here.
He is not out of bounds.
It's
No
like
question.
you can see some grass between those two.
No question.
Wasn't even close at all, and the loss of those points may well have been the reason that dear old BC Lions and Vic Rapp are not in and won't win and can't win the Grey Cup. Well, let's have some more bad news next. And that, of course, is the last arrival in Vancouver this morning of the Supercontinental. These are the arbitrary cuts made by Jean-Luc Pépin without any public input whatsoever, because of the fiddle they have whereby the CN and the CP, especially the CP, have been overcharging via for the use and cost of their lines. And then we come to more bad news. First time that Webster has ever interviewed since the days of H.R. MacMillan, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of MacMillan Bloedel, Calvert Knudsen. I'm sure he's going to be a prophet of endless doom and gloom. After that, we're going to pull the leg this morning of an NDP MLA who made it back into his constituency seat by the skin of his aquiline nose, Chris Darcy, the most unsought-after NDP MLA in the House at the moment. Later, we're going to find out what happened, whatever became of John Fryer, head of the biggest union in the country, or almost the biggest. It's only 250,000, and it's not true that John is taking lessons to lose his former English accent. Touch of humanity near the end of the program with Sarah Hughes, the woman who brought out all these Irish children last year to escape from the terrors of Northern Ireland with your help, and is going to do it again this year. But first, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the troubled MacMillan Bloedel operation, Calvert Knudsen, after the break. Calvert Knudsen is Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of MacMillan Bloedel. And I don't think Mr. Knudsen can cheer us up at all this morning. As I look at your losses in the third quarter of the year, and as I look at your layoffs, Mr. Knudsen, how long will it be before you're able to rehire your laid off or your fired employees and put MacMillan Bloedel back into a full-scale operation? I know you said that economic forecasts aren't what the paper they're written on, but I know that you have some fairly strong views on this.
Yes, I do, Jack, and it's, as you said, I'm a prophet of gloom today, but it's not endless gloom, and that's the important thing. I think there's a very good chance that things will be improving by the second half of next year, but I don't think that we'll see much improvement before then, and I think that we're going to see worse conditions before we see better conditions, not only in the forest industry, but throughout the entire economy. I think we're headed into a very, very sharp, deep recession, very much like the one that occurred in the U.S. in the fall of 1974 when President Ford held his economic conference and the theme was whip inflation now, and that's what Mr. McEchen said in his budget. We've got to whip inflation. But at that time, the economy was in a free fall, and that's where I think we are now.
So you say it's a minimum of 1 year, that's the fall of next year, only if certain things happen.
Absolutely.
And what things must happen?
Number one, we have to wring inflation out of the economy so that interest rates can go down, so that normal industrial expansion and residential construction and commercial construction can start up again. And that's the name of the game for the forest industry, is construction.
You're probably not directly political, but do you see any hope or any encouragement at all for anybody in McEachin's budget of last week to bring inflation down?
Well, yes, it'll certainly bring inflation down. There's no question about that. It might kill us all in the process.
Well, be more specific. How is it going to bring inflation
Well,
down?
it's going to bring inflation down by taking out an extra several $billion out of the economy during the next year. And this is at a time when the economy may not be all that healthy. I've just said it won't be healthy and may not be able to withstand that. I think he's going to have to come in with a mini budget sometime next spring to get things rolling again.
You mean to put back some of the things he's already taken
Yeah,
out
well,
in
or
the way of
some-
incentives?
Either that or some other things.
But were you and your company and the forest industry in British Columbia not negligent in your own way, knowing this was going to happen? You give the IWA and the unions a $500 million package.
Jack, this is...
You did, didn't you?
Absolutely.
$500 million.
We didn't give it to him. It was, in a sense, wrung out of us by a 6-week strike, which in our case extended to 10 weeks and threw us into a very serious loss in the third quarter. But there is a problem here of economic justice. After all, we're in an inflationary area where the inflation is running at, what, 12.5% here in Canada? So you have to recognize the legitimate expectations of workers in some kind of a substantial settlement. Now, I don't think 15% and 13% was warranted.
But
And
you
I don't-
voted for it.
We had to get people back to work, but we were only, we had gone too high before the beginning of the strike. That's
So what
the
you're
simple
telling me
answer.
now is that the union's economic demands, for which you have certain amount of personal sympathy, now run the industry, not you.
No, that's not true. The problem with the forest industry, or the wood product sector, is the economy, not the settlement. The settlement is making things very much more difficult right now because we're faced not only with lower prices, but sharply increased costs. So it's having a substantial impact on the companies and their viability and their ability to finance inventories and to stay operating, as a result of which we have a lot of curtailments, as you know. But it's the economy that's hit us so hard. Now, the settlement will show up. The adverse aspect of the settlement will show up in the long term by getting keeping our costs out of line. We've got to get our costs back in line, and I think everybody concedes that we went a little out of line.
So therefore, the only way you can now get your costs back into line is by a more efficient operation of your
More
plants.
efficient operation of our plants, more efficient operation of the entire company. That is everything. You know, the overhead, the administration, the sales, every aspect of the company has to operate.
So
more
therefore, it'll be
efficiently.
2 years before you're back to the full employment throughout the world of about 25,000 M&B people.
We hope it won't be that long, but it could be.
You've done a number of things. So what have you done with the corporate jet? Have you people in the upper echelon suffered at all?
Well, yes, I'll tell you how we've suffered. And it isn't because the corporate jet is down, because we still, when we have to travel, we travel on airlines, and certainly the airlines are comfortable, so that's not a great privation. What it does is it throws our schedules out.
But you have mothballed it.
But we have mothballed the corporate jet. There will be no executive bonuses this year, and that's a major thing for many of these people.
Would that be 10%, 15% of wages?
Yes, yes, for the management group.
How many management people have you laid off or fired permanently?
Well, what we've done is we've taken about 140 jobs out of the structure at this point, but not all of those people have been laid off. A number of them have been relocated within the company, a number have been relocated outside the company, and I think at last count we had about 30 to 40 who had not yet found reemployment.
You've tightened up on your advertising and your PR and all these things which you can only afford in times of prosperity.
That's right. They're good things to do, but only if you can afford them, and we can't afford them right now.
I don't own any MacMillan Bloedel shares, but this not indicate the management was a bit soft prior to this slump.
I don't think soft is a fair comment because this slump is almost unprecedented in the suddenness and the steepness of the drop. I mean, nobody anticipated this, so it's general throughout the industry, and I don't think softness is quite the answer.
Do you have a permanent hiring freeze in MacMillan Bloedel at the moment over which only which you can overrule?
Basically, that's what we have.
How many employees, forget the management group, are down the road at the moment?
We have about, as of the last report, which is a few days dated, about 1,500 employees are laid off hourly, and of course there have been the salaried reductions that I mentioned.
And then, of course, I presume you're working short shifts in many places with the reductions.
No, that's the whole, well, I take that back. At Harmac, where in the pulp mill, the employees have all gotten together and gone down on to a 36 or 37-hour week in order to accommodate, keep more people employed at slightly lower levels of pay.
Do you consult with the union on that? Does the union have any input
Yes.
on how you're going to operate the plants?
Well, they came up with the idea, and we worked out a schedule that would accommodate it. So we were happy to be able to do that.
Let's just go through the forest products for a moment. Pulp is still quite good.
Pulp is very mushy. It's not quite good. Newsprint is still quite good.
But you're the man-
media are doing extremely well, and you've seen the newspapers. They're still as thick as they ever were.
Did you not reject government subsidies which have been taken up by competitors in the East for new mill operations?
No, we never rejected any subsidy. It is the policy of the British Columbia government not to participate in that program that would make D.R.E. grants available for modernization of the industry.
But $450 million was handed out to Eastern firms.
That's right.
Is that unfair to BC?
A part of it is. Now, we can understand D.R.E. grants to help modernize obsolete facilities that have to be brought up to snuff for pollution control and that sort of thing. But in several cases, the major D.R.E. grants have been given to large companies, well-founded financial companies, to expand their capacity in, for instance, newsprint, also in fine paper, and at the same time, plenty of private capital was going into the newsprint sector. There was no necessity for D.R.E. grants to finance that kind of expansion, and all that does is mean that there's going to be a surplus of newsprint in the next year.
But
or
if
two.
Bennett hadn't said don't take it, you'd have taken your share.
If it had been available, we would have applied for it.
More with Calvert Knudsen, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of MacMillan Bloedel, after the break. Mr. Knudsen is the top man in MacMillan Bloedel, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer. Mr. Knudsen, one hesitates to ask a man of your dignity, prestige, and incredible salary a personal question. But Jack Monroe, on this program the other day, said, I said, what about MacMillan Bloedel? He said, I was talking to Adam Zimmerman. And Monroe asked Zimmerman if there were going to be any changes at the top in MacMillan Bloedel. And he says, Zimmerman said, that'll take time. Is your job secure?
As far as I know, Jack, my job is secure as it can ever be, but I want you to keep in mind that when you're in the top management of any major company, your job is never secure. It's high risk and high return. You can be knocked off any day if the board of directors doesn't think you're doing the job properly.
Right. Now, one thing I'd like to understand. BC is not for sale, said Bennett, when big Julie Sinclair was moving in to take over. And then Brick made a bid. And then Noranda took over. Who actually runs MacMillan Bloedel now? Is it Noranda Brascade with a big input from the Quebec government?
No. MB's management runs MB. We have a board of directors of 14 people, of which Noranda has 5 representatives. Adam Zimmerman, however, is our vice chairman, and he's a very influential guy because he's a very sound businessman, and he's active in the sense of oversight, not in day-to-day operations, but in dealing with us on major issues of policy regarding the company, and he's a positive influence.
But I want to get this Quebec government input into Noranda Brascade. There were some concerns expressed that the Quebec government in some way can exert a lot of influence which might change your type of operation on the West Coast.
I don't think that's likely.
Am I right on the facts of
yes,
that?
well, that's the concern, but keep in mind, number one, that the Quebec government doesn't have any representative on Noranda's board as yet. It won't happen for another 2 or 3 weeks, and they'll have 2 representatives on Noranda's board, and Noranda has the original 5 on our board, but we don't expect any additional nominees to our board.
Right. Next point. During a recent speech by Barrett, he said bluntly that if he were in power, that he would step in and take over operations being closed down and run them until things got better. What do you say to Mr. Barrett, the proposition that the government would step in and take over? Do you reject that absolutely as
Well, I
foolish?
think, you know, that may sound very appealing, Jack, but let's keep in mind that this man is spending our tax dollars, and for the government to come in and continually bail out failing companies means that we'll soon have a government that's operating all the obsolete facilities in the province using our tax dollars, and we wind up non-competitive in world markets. Frankly, I don't think the policy has been thought out very well.
You just think it's a sop to kind of make NDP supporters feel a little bit happier.
Absolutely.
Now, what about your competition in the United States? You've got pressure from Oregon and Washington, I don't know how influential it is, about BC lumber. Are you afraid of that? Can they stop our lumber going into the United States?
Well, obviously the U.S. government can stop our lumber from going into the U.S. They, in my opinion, they won't do that because the U.S. needs British Columbia, Canadian lumber, to supply its requirements. It doesn't have a sufficient domestic supply of lumber for the kind of construction activity they normally have down there.
Even now, they can't supply their own markets totally?
They could if they were all up and going, but they are suffering from the same problem that we have. They're running losses. As of last week, almost 50% of the Pacific Northwest lumber and plywood industry was either curtailed or shut down. So they're having a difficult time as we are. The combined flows of lumber from all sources in the U.S. are obviously sufficient for their needs at this time, but good Lord, the housing starts are at below 1 million annual rate, and that's half the needed rate to provide housing.
Without the U.S. housing starts, we just go down the tube to the measure we're presently down, or even further. Is that
Well,
correct?
there's no question about that. The U.S. is the market for 50% of the lumber that's produced in this province. In addition, however, every housing market in the world of any consequence is down. Japan starts are down to about 1.1 million, maybe lower. U.S. starts, as I said, are below 1 million. UK starts are down. Canadian starts are down. There isn't a housing market going today anywhere. And housing is dead.
Last week's budget finally put the knife through the heart of Canadian housing, didn't it?
I think so.
Well, I don't know what you're going to do. Probably you don't know either. It's just sit and wait.
Well, that's not exactly what's called for at this time. We have to turn things around within our company by running things better, running it leaner, being quicker response, adjusting to our markets. We still have, fortunately, in the company, we have a broad enough set of product lines that we have some that are still profitable, and we've got to make sure that we run the company so that we stay in good shape as we go through this. Now, I agree that we have to endure whatever there is to endure, and I think it's going to take a number of months. But
let's be a little more depressing, though. You're cutting your major capital expenditure programs right now.
That's right.
Which
right
ones
to the
are
bone.
you cutting out?
We're cutting out all of our major projects and all discretionary. We're cutting out all new discretionary spending. We simply aren't authorizing. We're cutting it down to what we call capital maintenance, the things we have to do just to stay in business, and we're finishing out an existing project down in Alabama.
In other words, you're wiping out the 91 million at Harmac and the 49 million paper machine at Island Paper Mills.
We're slowing them down to the lowest level possible without actually wiping them out.
It has been stalled indefinitely, it says in your own corporate communications manual. Now,
that's right.
Is it not a fact that you have failed, that we, and perhaps MacMillan Bloedel specifically, have failed in reforestation compared to your own former area of operation in Weyerhaeuser in the United States in reforestation?
Absolutely not. MB is the acknowledged leader in Canada as far as regeneration of the forest is concerned. MB has had programs going for reforestation, a very active program for more than 20 years, and it is actually on the leading edge of reforestation developments.
But you've only got a handful of reforestation tree planting going on this fall. Why don't you put people back to work reforesting this fall?
You've got me cold Jack, because I don't know the exact numbers, but we have a program of replanting thousands of acres every year, and we're going to replant thousands of acres this year. But we're not, because of the stringent economy, we're not going to be as extensive in our reforestation this year as we have been for the last two.
What brought me to that was a figure I remember from the back of my incredible memory, not quite senile, is that in the United States they used to spend something like $14 an acre, but in Canada as a whole, reforestation, we spend 4 cents an acre.
That's true of the company of the country as a whole.
It's true,
Yeah.
but not for MacMillan Bloedel.
Absolutely not. I can't give you a figure, but per acre. But we are well up on our regeneration program, and our objective is to be able to replant within 1 year of harvest on all of the acres that we manage, and we're almost there. Not quite, but we're almost there.
How'd you like to go for some phone calls?
Love to.
Calvert Knudsen, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of MacMillan Bloedel. Do you resent Mac Blow? I mean, calling him Mac Blow?
No, I don't like it, but I don't resent it.
After the break. You know what I'd like to see, Mr. Knudsen? I'd like to see you and Monroe go to Ottawa and hammer them jointly on the interest rates. Or do you not believe in artificial reduction? Are you the classic capitalist who wants to see the market forces and international affairs control interest rates?
I think that it isn't a question of what my ideology is, Jack. I strongly believe that only the market can be effective in reducing interest rates. I don't think the government can handle it any better than you or I acting individually, but the broad mass of citizens in all of North America will get interest rates down if they wring out the economy. I can tell you that.
But isn't it a fact that the American economy is basically healthier than ours because it's freer and they're not so socialized down there?
I think that's true. Some will disagree. The question of health, however, is relative to your resources. Canada is a tremendously strong country economically because of its massive resources. And Canada's economy can stand a lot of abuse now, and it has been abused, in my opinion. But regardless of the strength of this economy and the wealth of this country, we're still going to see a very tough winter. And I think the reason that I keep bearing down on this is that I think that if people understand that, they can protect themselves. It's when you get blindsided by a drop that makes it real tough. So I think we all should ring the alarm bells just a little.
I remember a number of years ago, MacMillan Bloedel got into great trouble on their shipping, overseas stuff, lost millions and millions, and you had a great clean out at the time. How much of your Canadian forest products industry, the revenues from it have to be used to subsidize your overseas stuff?
As of now, we are really out of all the losers overseas. Now, I don't want to overstate that, however. Earlier this year in the UK, we had some losses because you know what's happened in the UK economy. But they're back on an even keel now and not making any money, but not losing any, and we're not subsidizing any foreign operations. If anything, it's the other way around. Our operations in Alabama and the U.S. are producing a good profit and helping the rest of the company.
Maybe what this country needs is a Thatcher or a Reagan.
Well,
can I pin you politically at all? Have you ever taken a part actively in politics in this country?
No, I have not.
All I can just say is that you're a right-winger of some kind.
Well, I'm a conservative, there's no question about it. I believe in the market economy, and I think that the market economy will correct itself, and I also believe that all the forces of all the individuals and all the businesses can do one heck of a lot better job than a lot of government bureaucrats trying to fine-tune the economy and not knowing what the heck they're doing.
That's another question. When you're competing with Weyerhaeuser in the States or anybody in Washington or Oregon, surely your wage rates here are much higher than the wage rates down there.
That's right, and the thing that's keeping us competitive is the low Canadian dollar.
It's 84 cents now.
84 cents.
You'd like to see it at what, 75?
Well, I think 80 to 84 is just fine, because one of the consequences of having a low dollar is that we tend to import inflation, because our food costs and other import costs go up. But
It'd be fatal to you if the Canadian dollar strengthened with up to 95 or $1.10 as it was a
it
couple
would
of years
be a
ago.
crushing blow to the forest industry of this country.
Telephone calls to Calvert Knudsen. Go ahead, please.
Yes, being as we export half our products to the United States, A, how is it possible to go completely metric, and B, what would the cost be to your company?
Well, we are already completely metric in our ability to produce metric sizes, and of course we still produce the nominal dimensions for the U.S. market, but we're metric in many other markets. So that's mainly behind us. I think it's foolishness myself, and it was very costly and will be very costly for the entire country to do that.
But you're stuck with it and you'll cope with it.
Right.
Right. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Knudsen,
Yes.
I was thinking of more export. Now, we was talking about reforestation. Does MacMillan Bloedel have any reforestation going on in China at all, or helping out there?
No, we don't have any operations at all in China. We do have a joint venture with Brascan in Brazil, establishing a forest plantation down there, and it's at an intermediate point in development. It's hard to say what the long-range future of that is, but most of our efforts are here in Canada and in the U.S.
Thank you. One question. Do we sell anything to China?
Yes, we sell pulp, we sell newsprint, we have sold linerboard, we've sold corrugating medium. We have not sold any lumber or plywood to China, but we have had an active trade with China in the last several years.
Go ahead from Ladysmith to Calvert Knudsen.
Hello, Calvert. With regards to your stevedoring, your charters on your Flensburg type ship and New Dawn vessels, what plans do you have now or in the future on these with your high cost of charters? You answer that?
Well, the Dawn ships are very efficient vessels. They're profitable and they're contributing to the company. The Flensburgs, which were built in Germany on our long-term charter from a German ship owner, we've taken a beating on them because of, number one, their initial high cost, and number two, because the Deutschmark has been so strong against the Canadian dollar, so that the original charter hire turned out to be much higher than we anticipated. That has gone down to some extent. As you know, the Deutschmark has dropped substantially in the last 8 or 9 months, so that's a little better.
What's the significance of his question? You don't know, you just answered.
I don't know, but I can answer it.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. Knudsen, would you discuss the difference in the financial condition of MB now and the condition of the company just prior to Mr. Timmis's dismissal, such as the dividend comparison and debt comparison?
Well, we're still in a very healthy state as far as our debt ratio is concerned. We had a sharp loss, as you know, in the third quarter, mainly because of the strike, and I don't really expect to have a loss for the year as a whole, but we could have a slight loss or a slight profit. I think come see, come saw. And as far as comparing it with several years ago, I think we're in substantially better shape than we were then, because the company's facilities are in a lot better shape. Our modernization program has made us much better able to cope with this kind of situation.
Well, by the way, another nag from Monroe on your state-of-the-art mill. Where is that, over in Port Alberni?
Yes, Port Alberni.
He says it's a great modern mill, but it's noisy as all get out, and you should have consulted the workers on the noise level in that new plant.
Well, Jack ought to be ashamed of himself. We did consult with the workers, and he knows that as well as I do, and considering the type of equipment. And as a matter of fact, I'm surprised that he would say that, because that mill has, on many of the equipment, enclosed control cabins for people to sit in, and we will gradually, over time, probably put in more as we measure the level of noise at various machines.
Mine's not the reason why. Mine's merely to pass that particular point to you, and you appeal
I'll talk to
demolish.
Jack about that
You'll
separately.
speak to Jack Monroe about that. Another segment with Calvert Knudsen after the break. Yeah, you are a bit of doom and gloom this morning. A really doom and gloom question from me. Will a fair number of smaller companies, middle forest products companies, go under because of the interest rates they're carrying right now on commitments?
Well, that's a risk. That's a real serious hazard now that if this goes on, certainly if it goes on longer than we now expect, there's a serious risk of some companies going out of business. And this is happening on both sides of the border, by the way.
Yeah, so that's a minimum of, if it goes on longer than beginning of '83, a lot of people will be in real trouble.
Oh, there's no question about that, Jack.
Go ahead to Calvert Knudsen.
Good morning, Jack. I'm wondering if I could ask two questions and then hang up and...
Sure.
Okay. Question number one, Mr. Knudsen, could you reduce your labor problems by starting or improving upon a profit-sharing plan, or instead of a profit-sharing plan, perhaps a piecework bonus for the whole department? Thank you.
Good.
That's question number one. Let me say that we do have a variety of a profit-sharing plan for all employees, and that is a stock purchase plan in which the company matches a portion of the employee's contribution to the price. So there's a stock purchase plan, and it's been very successful, and I hope it will continue to be so. As a matter of fact, the price is right now.
$24.
Yes.
It used to be, what was the high?
The high, I think.
62.
Yeah, well, 62, that's
When
right.
Noranda paid that.
Noranda,
Second part, piecework bonus.
I can't answer that except to say, as a general proposition, our unions are opposed to piecework type pay rates. They feel that that's exploitive.
It's, yeah, and if they're opposed to it, there's no way you can touch it.
Sure, that's right. It's very difficult.
Wouldn't the loopholes for the rich wipe out the stock purchase if you are in any way assisting them to buy stock?
Well, that's a taxable benefit and always has been.
Always has been.
Always has been, yeah.
Same. From Ladysmith, go ahead, please.
Hello.
That's you. Speak up.
Yeah, well, I would just want to give a credit to Mr. Knudsen because he's the head of a terrific company. I've spent my entire life, and they are doing reforestation, and that's something that I know, and I think the public should know. Also, I would like to tell him that OAPs would love another little nudge up on the...
Or MacMillan Bloedel old age pensioners.
Yeah, on the pension. I'm sure everybody would like another little nudge up, and I guess this is one of those times when we all have to share the hurt, the pain.
But Webster's not a bad guy, by the way.
That's enough of that. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Good morning. I also used to have a lot of respect for the company. I've been with them for 10 years. But why is it every time things get tough, you always have to take it out on your salaried employees? I mean, in 10 years, this is the third time you swung the axe.
Yeah, I think that, number one, to say that we're taking it out only on the salaried employees isn't quite fair to the company, and it isn't quite fair to the whole situation. There are over approximately 1,500 hourly employees who are laid off. And so the impact on the salaried workforce has been at least relatively proportional. I think, if anything, less than on the hourly. And the other part of the question, why does it happen every 5 years? And I don't like it any better than anyone else, but I've been in this industry now for over 20 years, and it happens in every company in the industry. And we are in a cyclical industry, and when we have these tremendous cyclical downturns, there simply is no alternative than to pare back on staff at all levels. We don't have the business activity, the prices, the profits, the gross margins to support it.
Go ahead, please.
To finish my question, Mr. Webster, you're very quick on the trigger finger. But about the reforestation in China, and what I thought...
How did you get back again?
Yes.
we covered reforestation in China.
Well, what I wanted to say is, if you got a reforestation program going in China, wouldn't that help to get more export from that country?
Well, let me just put this to rest. The Chinese are not interested in having Canadians, companies come in and reforest China. What they're interested in, as a matter of fact, and several people have asked us, is if they can bring import Chinese workers to reforest Canadian forests. And as a general proposition, we've said we don't think that would be welcomed in Canada.
You're joking.
No, I'm not joking.
Recently?
Well, within the last year.
You mean bring over 10,000, 20,000, 30,000?
Well, I don't know how many thousand, but the idea being they would like to, this is in a conversational mode, Jack. This may not be a serious proposition, but the idea being that there's a vast pool of unemployed workers in China, and they'd like to put them to work somewhere.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Jack.
That's you?
Yeah. Cyril Foxcroft. I'm with the Port Alberni local of the IWA.
Port Alberni local.
Yeah, I want to, this isn't why I phoned, but I heard the discussion there. That new APD mill, there's no question that it is noisier than heck. And as far as the control booths are concerned, we got about half the booths in there we should have. But even at that mill, because it's open from one end to the other, is tremendously noisy and obviously not a good place.
Well, were you not consulted on it? Mr. Knudsen says there was worker input.
Oh, we had a committee set up, and there was discussions on the plans and the setup of the mill.
Okay, let's leave that to Monroe and you and Carl Knudsen. What's your question to the chairman of the board?
Well, what I want to talk about is the layoffs at Somas Division, and that's the other big plant in Port Alberni, Jack, and there's 1,100 people that were employed there in April, May of this year. And it's not true that the company have cut dramatically their staff people in that area. For example, that mill is down to 500 people, and there's only 18 supervisors been laid off out of that plant, and they were acting supervisors at the time. And right now that plant is going to go down for 5 weeks between now and Christmas. And my understanding is that the staff people will draw full salaries all the way through.
Okay, just a minute. True or false, Mr. Knudsen?
I can't verify the numbers, but it's true that we are facing further curtailments in a number of mills during the next 6 to 9 months. There's no question about that. And also in logging, we will shut down most of our logging operations later this month, and they will probably, in many cases, be shut down a good deal longer than is normal for winter shutdown. Yeah.
And will salaried people stay during a 5-week layoff? Will they stay on full pay?
In most cases, that's correct.
Okay, one final call. From Union Bay on Vancouver Island?
Good morning, Jack.
Good morning. Go ahead to Mr. Knudsen. You're the last call.
Yes, well, thanks very much. I'm finally on. I'd like to, my question is to Mr. Knudsen, has he give any consideration to the small contractor? And I'm speaking specifically in terms of the small logging contractor, and in my case, a small road builder. We sat up on top of the mountain after the strike was over for approximately 2 months waiting to go back to work. And in most cases where you have your equipment financed and one thing or another has been a severe blow to us. And there's most of the companies, they hire their contractors in the beginning of the year and carry on till the end of the year. And I'm wondering, my question is, what is his plans for the small contractor in the future, and what are we expected to do when we're laid off at this time of the year?
Well, number one, I'm sure you know that we use small contractors extensively in our operations. There are some operations whereby long-standing agreement with the IWA, we do not use independent contractors, but that's a limited area. So MB has been a major employer or user of small contractors over the years, and of course we also abide by the terms contained in our forest licenses, which require small independent contractors for a certain percentage of the cut. Now, what are we going to do right now? This is hard on small contractors, there's no question about that. It's also hard on our company-run logging operations, so everybody is hurt, and we're working with our contractors and we'll continue to work with our contractors to try and minimize the impact of this downturn on them. But nobody comes, it's not a free one for anyone. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
In other words, when they're working, you pay them. When they're not working, you don't pay them.
That's right, but we try and work out programs that will enable them to survive in a skinnied down mode, just as we are trying to survive in a skinnied down mode.
So these are the other casualties, apart from the direct layoffs or shift changes in MacMillan Bloedel. These are the other casualties we don't hear so much about.
That is correct.
Just to sum up briefly, therefore, we can expect this recession to last at least until?
I think at least until the second half of next year, Jack.
That's the end of 1982 and maybe longer.
Well, I hope not longer than that. That would be very, very serious.
My thanks to Calvert Knudsen, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of MacMillan Bloedel. I almost said the IWA, but I mean MacMillan Bloedel. Next we'll have a little nag at Darcy from Rossland-Trail, then we'll talk to John Fryer. Thanks again, Mr. Knudsen.
Thank you, Jack.
After the break. When a sitting member of the legislature is challenged at his nominating convention, if he gets beaten, that means he can't run again for his party. And that's almost what happened to Chris Darcy, the NDP incumbent for Rossland-Trail. Chris, how many votes did you win by yesterday at your nomination battle?
2.
2? Well, these 2 are the people that you had signed up over which there was trouble about your signature on membership cards.
I have no idea.
Why did they want to get you, Chris? Who was out to get you?
That's a good question, Jack. I think this sort of thing could happen to anyone, quite frankly. When anyone's been in office for a while and it's considered to be a secure seat, there's always going to be some people who are personally ambitious, and that's part of the democratic process.
Except that you didn't expect as the NDP sitting member to be kind of an attempt made to stab you in the back by the people whom you called the fringe group zealots.
There were some rather strange things said during the campaign, which it's rather difficult when you're a sitting member. The people opposing you can say anything or do anything. You're in a position where you just have to tough it out, not descend to their level, and do the job, and hope the majority of people judge what is going on for what it really is.
Chris, what were they saying about you?
Well, there was a general smear campaign that I was indulged in illegal, immoral, and generally unethical activities of varying sorts.
One word from John Fryer, and 250,000 members of N.U.P.G.E bend to his will.
Yeah.
Explain yourself, John, because while you've been away on sabbaticals and in the Far East, living in the restricted atmosphere of Ottawa, we seem to have lost sight of the great Fryer.
Well, I don't know that necessarily is bad, but we have a national organisation of provincial government employees that tie together the 9 organisations in 9 of the provinces, Quebec accepted.
Oh, Quebec accepted?
Yeah.
Won't talk to you?
Well, no, it's not a question they won't talk to us. They have statutory prohibitions on joining an organisation outside the province. Public service workers who work directly for the provincial government by law can't join an organisation outside the province.
I didn't know that before.
Yeah,
Do we have the same statutory provisions?
No, but in the constitutions or in the enabling legislation in some provinces, this is the case. In Alberta, there are prohibitions if they have an arbitration case, for example. Nobody from outside the province of Alberta can sit on a government arbitration board to deal with government employees. So it's not unheard of. In any event, we have these 9 organisations from the other 9 provinces tied together in a national union, and the headquarters have to be in Ottawa. And we had a president who resigned in mid-term after he announced his candidacy for the Liberal Party of Manitoba.
So you threw him out?
That's right. And I was asked to go and fill in the gap and serve out the term, which is why I'm doing it.
So you've totally walked away from your faithful friends in the BCGEU.
No.
And you're doing this Piola job in Ottawa.
Well,
political job. I didn't mean Piola job.
No, I'm on a leave of absence. I talked to my executive here in BC, and they said, well, serve out the term and we'll give you a leave of absence. So that ends next June.
Now, these 9 organisations, excluding Quebec, 250,000 members.
About 230.
230. Is it the intention of this to become a strikeable national organisation except Quebec?
No, I would say not, because in each province we operate under specific provincial statutes governing labour relations for government employees. However, one thing I am working towards is coordinated bargaining strategies, so that when the provincial governments get together and try and gang up on the employees, that we've got an organisation on the other side of the table that says that has a common strategy. For example, when governments get together and set artificial wage guidelines, I want to make sure that the unions are getting together and dealing with the wage issue from the other side of the table.
How big are the disparities in wages, and there must be immense, between a provincial government employee in British Columbia, and I won't even mention ferry workers, but you know, BCGEU person, with, say, someone in the most underprivileged province? Give me an example.
Or probably a 50% differential in pay.
In other words, if it, we'll just take
Newfoundland, say, or New Brunswick.
In other words, just we'll just take $12 here, $6 there.
However, just let me say something else. If you take the 4 western provinces, which are all part of our organisation, there are virtually no differences at all. Manitoba slightly less. Saskatchewan in many cases the highest paid, Alberta in many cases the highest paid, BC highest or second, so in the 4 western provinces we have a lot in common.
Right. In how many places are civil servants, BCGEU type of thing, allowed to strike? Where are they not allowed to strike?
Alberta.
No strikes.
Ontario.
Ontario.
Nova Scotia, PEI.
Nova Scotia, PEI.
The other 5 they are.
Are they upset about this, or do they get arbitration instead?
Yes, well, they're very upset. In Alberta, Ontario, Nova Scotia and PEI, we have a complaint lodged with the International Labour Organization in Geneva because international statutes say that it is wrong and improper to have a blanket prohibition against public employees striking. They say you can stop essential workers striking by statute, but not a blanket prohibition against janitors and clerks and people like that. And so we've got a complaint lodged in Geneva right now.
So you're doing the thing that the Native Brotherhoods, the Indians, are doing. You're going outside the country to international arenas to get propaganda value inside the country.
We're doing both. I mean, I'm meeting next week with the Minister of Labour from the province of Alberta, and we're trying to hope that some of these governments will bend. So we're doing both. We're going internal and external.
All right. Normally you come dressed here in a business suit. This morning, under your new image, you look like a clown in a Jack-in-the-Box suit.
No.
What are all gimmicks about?
Well, I don't wear suits, but I do often wear sports jackets. But in any event, we're off to Ottawa tonight on the train.
Who's we? You and your wife and family?
No. Some 50 or so protesters from our BC group, and we're picking up people in every province as we go across the country.
Have you chartered the train?
Well, you can't charter the train, but what we've done is we've bought every available ticket on the train.
How many?
About 300.
Who pays for that?
Well, each individual province as we go through it. I mean, in Alberta, the Alberta Union will pay, and the BC, BC Union will pay.
You pick out your 50 noisiest BCGEU members and say, we want you to come to Ottawa.
We asked for volunteers. We didn't pick out noisy ones. It's part of a lead-up to a mass protest demonstration on Parliament Hill on Saturday. The Canadian Labour Congress has called. We're hoping for something up to 50,000 people on the lawns of the Parliament buildings on Saturday. And this is part of the build-up. There's a marathon started in St. Catharines. The UAW is sponsoring. We're sponsoring the N.U.P.G.E protest train that we're taking from the west to the east. And
you've timed it very badly, said he, with deference, respect and humility.
What's that?
Your protest is out of time. We got the budget last week.
Yeah, what was in it?
Nothing.
Not exactly. So carry on.
So they're not going to do anything now, because interest rates, he can tell you if he comes out, Mr. McKechnie, that they've gone down from 22% to about 18%.
Well, we think they can do something about it. We think that we can easily return to the days when the Government of Canada in the Bank Act, or the Parliament of Canada in the Bank Act, set the interest rates that the banks could charge, period. They didn't leave it to the market, they didn't leave it to the banks. So we can go back to those days. We can set rates of interest, especially for mortgages.
Somebody's got to pay for it, though, because money earns, at the moment, we'll say 20%.
Yes.
Right? Money earns 20%. So if you give that money out at 11%, somebody's got to pick up the 9%, no matter who's loaning the money.
No, Jack, no, not so at all, in my opinion. The only way that somebody who has to lend it out at 11% in order to bring usurious interest rates down could make 20% is by shipping the capital out of the country, by imposing exchange controls. We can stop it going out of the country.
He has rejected exchange controls, specifically in the budget.
Of course he's rejected exchange controls because that's what his business friends have told him to do. But the fact of the matter is that people are losing their homes, farmers are losing their farms, small businessmen are losing their businesses, and I'm afraid we can't just run this country for the benefit of a few high-priced executives.
He's put $50 million into the budget to help bankrupt farmers. He's put $12,500 times $3,000 to help those, in fact, losing their homes.
And he's got a report, or not him, McEachran, but Cosgrove's got a report sitting on his desk saying that another 40,000 are going to lose their homes the next year. He's got a piddling program for a minuscule number of those. The interest rate situation has got to be addressed by the government, and McEachran in his budget did nothing about it, and we're going to Ottawa, and many thousands of other people are going to Ottawa to let them know how displeased we are with what they haven't done.
The only answer for your type of economic control is an NDP government, let's be honest.
That's one of the answers, but I don't think it's the only one. And of course, great gains are being made provincially anyway. By tomorrow night, we'll have a new NDP government in Manitoba, and presumably the next time we have an election here, we could find a similar situation. So, I mean, gains are being made, but nevertheless, it worked it didn't work, but it was the way that the people of this country demonstrated in the 1930s when economic conditions went out of control, and we're going to try and do some of the same thing.
There isn't the suffering there was in the 1930s.
Well, there isn't the same type of suffering, I agree with you, Jack, in terms of people going hungry. But there is the same sort of suffering or the same sort of trauma involved when people who have saved all their lives to buy a home suddenly find themselves in jeopardy of losing that home, or payments on that home doubling in front of their very eyes.
Capitalising. The banks won't dare to foreclose many homes, and now the government has guaranteed
You trust the banks? You trust the banks?
The government guaranteed the
For
fact.
12,000 people?
No, for everybody. Over 30 gross of your income, the government will guarantee, I mean, it's sleazy, the capitalisation and the long-range payoff.
Whose income is that? Is that the income of a family? Is that the income of an individual?
It says combined income in the budget.
Okay, so the guy has a combined income, or the woman has a combined income. Something happens in the family situation, one of the breadwinners is injured, there's a marriage breakdown, what happens? Your house goes.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does.
They merely capitalise the interest, and your grandchildren...
Oh, and then you get to pay at the end of it. So instead of paying $500,000 for a house that cost $80,000, you end up paying $600,000 for a house that cost $80,000.
Look, I'm not going to argue with John. I mean, you know, it's a good NDP ploy, and they're perfectly entitled to do it. You certainly won't be voting, a lot of your members won't be voting Liberal next time, I'll tell you that, will they?
I don't know how my members vote.
You want them to vote NDP though, don't you?
I want them to exercise the intelligence that they have.
Why don't
It might be the same thing.
Time for some calls to John. Is he wasting his time, he and his 300 seats in a train to Ottawa, to stand about in the rain with the Mounties with their clubs? Snow in the background. After the break, to John Fryer. John Fryer, off in his little choo-choo to Ottawa, one of the last choo-choos out of town.
Right on.
Go ahead to John Fryer.
Hello, Jack?
Yep.
Yeah. Listen, you were absolutely right. His timing is the way out. Now, everybody knows if they're going to visit somebody, they want to visit them when they're home. Now, a Saturday, the Parliament is not around on a Saturday. It's their day off.
Just a minute. It's not. Is it a Saturday you're going?
Well, the protest, we get there on Friday. The protest demonstration is held on Saturday, but the leaders of all the parties and the Minister of Housing have been invited to attend on the Hill, and we already have some positive indications, and some parties we haven't heard from. Yeah. The Prime Minister being one of the guys we haven't heard from.
Oh, and no doubt Broadbent will be there.
I
no doubt Clark will be there.
I would hope so.
No doubt Cosgrove will receive a delegation in his office.
Well, we'll get to meet them.
Jack, don't you think that the timing is wrong just on that account?
Ask John, don't ask me.
Don't you think so, Mr. Fryer?
Yeah, the alternative we had was to shut down a number of operations for that day in order to go to Ottawa and have that protest demonstration, and we decided against shutting down the operations because it's not the employers that we're uptight about, it's the government and its interest rate policy.
And you get lots of TV coverage now anyway, so it doesn't matter if anybody's there. All you've got to do is get your 50,000 out and you're a big success.
That's the big job.
If you get 10,000 out, you're a disaster.
Well, we'll have no trouble getting a large number out.
Go ahead to John Fryer.
500 buses chartered.
500 buses. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I wish John Fryer all the luck.
Thank you.
And I think you're doing a good job, but the man you have to face, I think, has deaf ear. But I disagree with Webster when he thinks it won't do any good, because it's the people of the workers or of the people who have the homes or who are losing them. At least you're doing something, not just sitting down about it.
Well, that's precisely the point, Jack. We are trying to do something. Obviously, we're not naive enough to think that the government's going to roll over and accept our solution.
But if you don't do anything, they'll just think you're happy.
If we don't keep the pressure on them, they're not going to do anything.
Go ahead to John Fryer. That's you.
Hello?
That's you. Speak up.
Mr. Fryer.
Yes, sir.
You must have a lot of time on your hands to be doing this kind of thing.
I think it's important, therefore I'm giving it the priority that I think it deserves, I guess. I mean, I've got a lot of other things I could be doing, but this is, I think, is more important than those other things at this time.
Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes?
John?
Yes?
I am an old BC government employee, now retired.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to wish you all the luck. I'll be very brief. John, you're a very nice person. You have done an awful lot for us here in BC, and you're held in high regard. And I think as a PR man, that there couldn't be a better guy going down across Canada, because you come across very nicely. You're not vindictive. You've got a lot on the ball. And I think you'll be an inspiration to working people.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, don't you think you made a mistake in putting your beard back on again?
No, not at all. Not at all. I had to do something to hide my double chin.
Did your wife approve of this beard?
No, she doesn't really. She was the one that sort of persuaded me to shave it off. But in any event, that's another story.
Oh. Go ahead from Victoria.
Good morning, Mr. Webster and Mr. Fryer.
Good morning.
I'd like to make one comment. I appreciated your comment on Mr. Fryer's dress this morning. I really did. And I honestly think I've been a member of the BCGEU for the past, 6 years, and to go to the various meetings that they have, whether it's union executives, local executives, etc., I think it's about time they started wearing proper clothes when they went to them instead of a BCGEU jacket. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the reason for wearing our jackets, of course, is that we want to identify ourselves as protesters from BC and from our union. And the way you do that is to identify yourself.
So you're not only 300 tickets, you bought 300 jackets.
No, we've had jackets for years, Jack. Have you seen union jackets?
No, I thought that was
just like your bowling jacket.
I thought that
you wear
was
on
a ferry worker's jacket.
No, just like the bowling jacket you wear on the ferry, Jack. Same thing.
Makes me look as fat as a big too. Last call from Victoria. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Fryer?
Yes, sir.
The jackets are fine as long as they're union made.
They are.
They're
They are union made, I can assure you.
Much of the cost?
Yeah.
Oh, about 25 bucks.
Two quick questions. Have the membership been asked how much these funds will cost the membership, and was there any method of determining who should go?
Yes, there was, both. I mean, the decisions on matters like this are made by the union's elected rank-and-file provincial executive, which governs the union between conventions, and that was discussed and voted on by them. Then each component within our union was contacted for volunteers, and I can't tell you exactly who's going to be there until I get to the station this evening, but it was done on a volunteer basis.
Right. Are you only a temporary acting president of N.U.P.G.E?
Well, I'm serving out the term which ends in next June.
Are you coming back to lead the strike against the provincial government next year?
They'll decide the latter part. I'm definitely coming back to lead the negotiations with the provincial government next year. Whether or not a strike occurs is up to the government.
NDP or social credit, you're going to go your best lick for about 20%.
I'm not going to tell you what the figure is or our strategy is, but I can assure you that we're going to go, regardless of the political stripe of the people in power, for a substantial catch-up raise and then provisions to keep us up with inflation.
COLA clauses and all the rest of it. When does your train leave?
It leaves at 9:45 p.m. tonight, heading east.
Precisely. John Fryer.
Thank you,
After the
Jack.
break, Sarah Hughes.
But I was crying a bit. I want to stay here and see my parents too.
You were crying?
Yeah, I don't want to go home.
It was about a year ago that Sarah was. A year ago you were on the program, Sarah.
A year, yes. And
Sarah was running the Fund for Irish Children, non-profit society in Vancouver. And a lot of our listeners were very helpful indeed, I believe, in helping to sponsor children who came out from the strife-torn areas of Northern Ireland to have a helpful, sane holiday away from all the troubles on both sides. Sarah, when did you come out this time?
I came out on Friday evening.
Friday night?
Yes.
Now, that was after Bradford was shot, wasn't it?
Yes, after, yes.
You were talking to him recently?
Yes, 2 weeks ago, yeah.
So you keep your relationships open with both sides?
On both sides, yes.
And since he was shot, there have been a number of what seem to be reprisal killings of some kind.
Yeah.
So before we talk about the children, Sarah, is it any better or any worse in Northern Ireland than it was a year ago?
Well, I think really it has really got worse, really from the shooting point of view.
It was quieter for a wee while there.
It was.
And then they came, when you were here last time, they went on a hunger strike.
They did, yes.
Then came the hunger strike, then came whatever, now the Bradford, now the other ones. Is it never going to end?
Don't believe it.
How many children did you bring out last year?
I brought 83 children. Owing to your programme, it did a lot. Before I came here, there was only 18 or 19 people interested. With your programme, it went up to 83, which I was very...
Now, how about the kids? We saw some of the kids just at the break there, but have you seen any of the children who came out since then?
Yes, I've interviewed a lot of them and found out how they... In fact, I've some letters here from them that they...
Let me see a couple of them.
You know, from the children that...
How old were the children again?
From 8 till 12-year-old.
8 till 12-year-old. And were they from how many families did the 83 children come?
About, how many families? I'd say about 76. Some people took 2 children, you know. It is expensive this year. We are flying them into Vancouver. It will be $600 for the host families. And by the way, it's a Sir Hughes Society. For Irish children, it has changed that anyone that is interested, for them to remember.
Now, the drill as last year is that a sponsor family has to put up the $600 for the fare, or a group of families.
Yes.
And then put them up for what time and what months?
5 to 6 weeks from end of June to August.
From the end of June till the back of...
5th, 6th of August.
The 5th or 6th of August?
Yes.
Now, did you have any problems at all with any children last year?
Very little problems, you know. I mean, I've 10 years experience in the Midwest of America, and I'm known all over for my work, and we do really try to do our best. Although last year I had only 5 weeks to round up 83 children, well, that was a bit of work.
So apart from the 83 that come to British Columbia, you've got others that go to the
There's
Midwest.
others go right all over America, all our organisations.
Are they all from the original Fund for Irish Children?
No, they're different organisations like this here.
So now you've got the Sarah Hughes Society of British Columbia.
Yes.
And the phone number for it is 943-2403. We should put that up. Ted Cotter is the president at 943.
In fact, there he's over there.
Was Ted over there?
There he's over there.
I didn't know he was here, dash it. Nobody told me. I hope you'll forgive me for not putting him on the show. Dash, I didn't know that. Now, here's a letter from, who is it from? Margaret Dixon. I wish Ireland was like Canada when you hardly ever hear of violence. It was really peaceful to be away from the bombings, the murders, and the hunger strikers. Ah, dear. I was staying with a family in Richmond, BC. They have 5 children. We went swimming nearly every day. They had 6 guinea pigs, a dog, a budgie, and a rabbit. They're getting a hamster and another bird soon. When we went to Kelowna on the 18th of July, we asked people to take care of the animals. That's great. You've got dozens of letters like this, I've no doubt. Read me a wee bit of one.
Well, this is one from a child that has applied for a holiday that day before I came away, and she says, "Dear Mrs. Hughes, would you please give me a chance to get on a holiday with you and my brother also, Mark. We have never had a holiday and I would love to go away somewhere, but Mommy can't afford it to take us anywhere. As she said, food is more important, and she buys more food. I am 11 years old, and Mark is 9 years old. Yours sincerely, June.
That's nice,
Truly.
isn't it? Read me another one. I love your accent.
Dear
If I
Mrs.
can understand it, anybody can understand it.
Dear Mrs. Hughes, I was very glad to see you when you arrived home, that you are arranging yet another holiday for children of Northern Ireland. My two boys are 9 and 11, both go to Argyll Primary School. Their hopes are built up and being picked to go to Canada.
Question. You won't be bringing out the same children next year?
No, unless that the host families that have had a child request it back again. But we really don't encourage it. But if they really want it, they're paying the fare, and we do not
in other words,
stand a child.
if they weren't going to take somebody else, you'd bring out the same child. But the idea,
but
surely...
only to the people that has already had the child. We never would pick a child to go to a different
place.
Because they've already seen Canada and they've experienced it.
Oh, it really is a great scheme, and it's non-sectarian, it's non-religious, it's non-discriminatory.
Yeah. Yes.
And you work both sides of the street to pick the children that deserve to go.
Because I had a store in the Peace Line over 25 years ago, which
was it a sweetie shop?
Yeah.
How did I know it was a sweetie shop?
Well, my figure. And some of these children that I interview, I had sold candy to their mothers.
Have you got that number? If not, we'll put it up at the end. It's Ted Cotter. There are two numbers. I'll give you one now. 943-2403. Sarah, best of luck.
And Mr. Cotter, by the way, is the new president
of the Sarah Hughes Society of BC, non-profit, and I'll tell you more after the break.
You plan on coming back someday?
I hope so, yeah.
Maybe to Louvre?
Yeah, I am coming back to Louvre.
Well, it was the end of an era in Vancouver this morning when they took off the Edmonton-Jasper-Kamloops train on the Via Rail cuts. Really? I'm sorry to see them go. 20 years from now, we'll have them back again. I'll bet you. There it's arriving this morning at 7:30. A lot of guys are going to lose jobs. A lot of resorts are going to lose money. A lot of people are going to lose heart.
I worked for the railway. I put in 15 years for them. I hate to see all this disappear.